about half an hour ago or so, but I reached them at about, I think, 10 minutes ago. So it's a bit tough on them, but we've agreed Vukile will, with his team, lead us on the policy issues as they appear from page 33 onwards, or slide 33 onwards to 38. There's not much point looking at the submission from the staff from Parliament because it doesn't say anything of... it's a very good overview of the key issues that have brought us here, but not the policy issues that surfaced on the NA side and that were covered by the Treasury. So it's unfortunate because committee colleagues, we should not rely on Treasury really. They do their job. It's we're holding them to oversight, to account. It's for Parliament, assisted by our staff on technical issues. Ultimately, we make the policy decisions, but on technical issues, the staff's meant to help us to at least put the key issues before us. So, for example, Dennis, you raised several issues. They're not covered in that report. I'm not sure why. But anyway, you'll come back to us on them. But let's start with you, Vukile. And before we go on, in Kulileko, are there any apologies?
Morning, Chairperson. Yes, I received an apology from Ms. Mahlangu, Chair.
She's out of the country on parliamentary business. I think she's in Canada for some parliamentary conference, right? So she'll only get back later this week, but she'll be here next week, presumably. So we understand that. No other apologies, right? And from the Treasury side, is everybody on the platform, I mean? I see Vukile is here.
Yes, morning.
Sorry?
Apologies from the acting DG. He
No, we understand Vukile. Yeah, obviously. He's very busy and he's not expected to always be here. Okay, go for it, Vukile, from slide 33, if that's okay. Is the committee fine with that? Any other options now to go forward? As you know, what we usually do is look at the policy issues first in a bill. And once we arrive on agreement or disagreement with the policy issue, then what we do is we look at it line by line. There's no point looking line by line unless we identify the key policy issues. Okay, fine. So over to you, Vukile. Is anybody else got any other approach to this from the committee side?
Supported.
Good. Let's move on. And Dennis, you were very good last time. I hope you remember what you said.
Supported, Chairperson. Supported.
Okay. Supported. Mama Rakhale supports us. She's the whip of the whole committee, Dennis, not just the ANC. Okay. We had a big debate last term. And so we have to toe the line here. Otherwise, we'll all get fired. Okay. Over to you, Vukile. But fortunately, Mama Rakhale is my buddy, so she's not likely to fire me. Okay, let's go on. Over to you, Vukile. Okay,
thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to just confirm that I can share my screen.
Yes, you may, Vukile.
Okay, excellent.
Yes, you may, Vukile.
Okay.
Vukile, you are on mute.
Vukile, you muted yourself, I think. Oh dear.
On mute.
Vukile, you muted yourself, I think. Oh dear.
Sorry, apologies for that. I hope that's now audible.
No, we can hear you now. Good, good. We can hear you now. So we're going to slide 33, please.
Yes.
Public submissions and Treasury response. Yes, thank you. No, we can hear you now. Good, good. We can hear you now. So we're going to slide 33, please.
Yes.
Public submissions and Treasury response. Yes, thank you.
Chef, for some reason, when I try and project, my microphone turns off. I'm wondering whether, Janine, you can help me just project and I can talk through the slides if that's okay. Apologies, Chair. For some reason, when I try and project, my microphone turns off. I'm wondering whether...
No, it's not your fault.
Thank you. I'll project just
but we do have it, so it's not like it's the end of the world. No, it's not your fault.
Thank you. I'll project just
but we do have it.
So thank you, Chair. Just as Janine projects, thanks again for the opportunity to recap the deliberations at the SCOF. before kicking into the specifics of the presentations that we had received and our responses to that, I'd like to maybe spend a second just recapping some of the broad principles that have guided us so far.
All right, go for that. Yeah,
From a
very
policy
quickly though. Yeah.
Okay. So Chair, you'll just obviously be mindful that whenever we seek to impose levies, there's always going to be, I guess, a sense that we are charging too much, especially at the moment, just given the various cost pressures that are being experienced by consumers. And an important point that we try to make throughout the presentations are twofold. One is that we don't believe that it's possible to completely avoid the cost of regulation. All that can happen is that you can distribute the incidence. And what we mean by that is that ultimately a weak regulatory framework will cost consumers of financial services through increased complaints, increased predatory action by certain financial firms, and ultimately the increased likelihood of failure of financial institutions and risk to financial stability. The second important principal point, Chair, is that as much as possible, we have inserted proportionality into the two bills in front of you. And what we mean by that, Chair, is that the larger institutions pay more, the larger sectors contribute disproportionately more to funding the regulators, who have only levied on a cost recovery basis. And one additional important point, Chair, is that we've also incorporated a mechanism for firms that, for whatever reasons, either in the operating environment or something specifically related to that firm, they can approach the regulators to have for additional accommodation in putting off or not paying levies. So overall, we feel like we have gone as far as we conceivably can to accommodate the various comments that were received and requests for accommodation. Janine, can I pass over to you to take us through the specific comment and how we responded to it? Janine, can I pass over to you to take us through the specific comment and how we responded to it?
Janine, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, apologies. Sorry, I'm just having a little screen problem.
Janine, are you there?
Just
No problem.
thank you. Yes, apologies. Sorry, I'm just having a little screen problem.
No problem.
So in relation to some of the specific comments, there was a request for clarity on the definition of supervised entity by the South African Insurance Association. And so as a result of that, we proposed to amend the definition to allow to provide that the definition clearly links to the definition of supervised entity, both in the Financial Sector Regulation Act, but of the types that are listed in Schedules 1 to 6 of the bill. So we clarified the scope of the definition. It had been highlighted that that would be beneficial, and so we ensured that we provided that clarification.
Look, on this one, we'll do one by one so that we're clear, so we don't keep coming back. You see, we can do all and then come back to each, it'll waste time because you've already done an overview, right? So I suggest we look at each one, Janine, Bukile, and members of the committee, and then say whether we okay with it or not. Now, this trivia coverage, colleagues, seems straightforward, right? It's a technical definition. Anyone got any issue on this? I don't see any hands up. In Kulileko, you'll help me with that, right? So good. Let's move on to the next one, which is the duplication of the levy payment.
Yes. So it was highlighted that there should not be a duplication of the levy payments to the FSCA and the PA. as the impact on smaller insurance would be significant. And and it was highlighted in response that the cost of funding regulators is based on cost recovery and is sought to be kept at a minimum. And the Reserve Bank will fund a portion of the Prudential Authority's total costs, including indirect costs, which I think has been further highlighted in the presentations, would be estimated at about 40%. So there is no duplication of the costs. And then Clause 11, it was highlighted in the levies bill, has been amended to provide a greater facility for the regulators to grant exemptions on their own initiative. And that was in response to some comments received. So it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, no, we get it. On this one, oh, sorry, finish, Jane.
Aicha.
Yeah.
I've got a hand from Mr. Ryder.
Yes, Mr. Ryder.
Yeah, sorry, providing we're finished with that.
Are we looking at the second one, the duplication of levy payment? Are you with that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, good morning, everybody. So I think that, again, this is probably where my biggest bugbear comes in, and I'm sorry, my screen doesn't look great because of the light behind me. But so, you know, saying that costs will be kept to a minimum is kind of saying, you know, a piece of string is X length. There's no incentive really for the regulator to keep its costs down, and I think this is our biggest concern. The clause 11 amended to allow for regulators to grant exemptions on their own initiative. If I can just ask, is there an appeal authority? Perhaps is there a clause that will allow someone to appeal if you ask for an exemption, the regulator declines it? Will there be an appeal authority, perhaps to what, I don't know, the Reserve Bank or to Treasury?
Yeah. Is there any other question in regard to this? Any other questions? I don't see any other hand up. Okay, look, firstly, you know, for those of you who were not around, you may not know this, but we had huge issues arising around the insurers, particularly those emerging insurers who had, you'll remember, Janine, I'm not sure, Vukile, to what extent you were involved in the bill, I've forgotten. You know, you'll recall that the black insurers in particular, they were really like cheesed off with the bill, and we made, in fact, what had happened was, you might recall, we postponed processing the bill and then had the financial sector transformation hearings over 3 days or whatever, right? It was because maybe the insurers came on the first bill. And then we said, no, we're not proceeding with the insurers bill until we deal with the broader issues. So here, they had quite a legitimate case, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes unfair, but overall, you know, I mean, the majority of the claims were, let's regard as legitimate by, I think, more than one party, actually. So I can't recall, but, you know, there was some degree of consensus anyway. Well, certainly with the EFF and ANC, and I think maybe the DA too, actually, on this one. So I think we should be cautious here, and exactly the point that Dennis is raising occurred to me when I looked at this earlier this morning, that what does that mean, Clause 11 amended to allow for regulators to grant exemptions? Is there some requirement of them to, well, I see somewhere else you talk about public hearings. So firstly, will this involve some sort of public consultation? Secondly, is it the case here that the minister must look at it and sort of okay it or reject it? And if so, on what criteria? Thirdly, is there a role for Parliament to play in this regard, and so on? But the first part of your argument to me seems fair, Jenny. The cost of funding regulators will be based on cost recovery and kept at a minimum. It's based on cost recovery. Now, this is very surprising. Eh? I mean, this is 40% the Reserve Bank's going to fund. Is this correct as I read it? Janine, Vukile, that the Reserve Bank will fund a portion of PSO, including indirect costs, estimated at 40%. Wow. Okay, there it is. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, over to you, Janine and Bukile.
Thank you very much. In relation to, the determination of the levies, firstly, the actual imposition is imposed in terms of the legislation, which will be, enacted by Parliament, and there's been the various consultation processes that have been undertaken through the parliamentary process and prior to that. And then any subsequent adjustments will be addressed in terms of Chapter 16 of the FSRA, which provides, that every year, if there's going to be any adjustments, there has to be public consultation and also to adjustments in the levies each year and the budgets of the institutions. So that's an important mechanism overseeing the levies going forward. But in relation to actual granting of exemptions, that's a discretionary process, whether there would be exemptions. I imagine there would be submissions made if there was an actual application on behalf of a financial institution regarding the proposed exemptions and the request for an exemption, and then due consideration would be given by the regulator in relation to the request for exemptions. So.
Thank you, Janine. I was wondering, Chair, if just to interject, to provide a little bit more detail on exactly how the appeal mechanism of the exemption would work, which was the direct content of Honourable Ryder's question, if you'd allow. I was just, Rita, could you provide just some details exactly how the mechanism would work and how an affected institution may go about appealing?
Thank you. Now, with respect to, an appeal mechanism, those decisions of the regulators which constitute administrative action, they are then subject to reconsideration, an application for reconsideration by the Financial Sector Tribunal. And so there is that process for reconsideration, generally in relation to decisions of the regulators. So potentially, if there was, an grievance in relation to a decision of the regulator, it could potentially be then proposed to be reconsidered before the tribunal. Thank you. And then in relation to the funding provided by the Reserve Bank, can I perhaps ask Yanette or other colleagues from the Reserve Bank to confirm the arrangements relating to the funding?
Thank you, Janine. Yes, indeed. So the estimated 40% is correct. The Reserve Bank will be funding the indirect costs. So those would be your shared services, for example, IT infrastructure, building costs, those kind of shared services that we have across the PA, whereas the direct costs are what will be levied. Those would be, for example, PA-specific systems, staffing, those kind of costs would be in the 60% then. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions on
So
this?
in other words,
comment?
No, I was about to say just very quickly, that means that 40% is not such a burden on the Reserve Bank, because those are resources and other infrastructure they already have. There's like a shared service with the regulators that are relevant here. I think that's what you're saying. Is that right, Jenny? Hello?
Yes, yes, that would be correct. Thank you.
Okay, Yeah, okay, all right, I'm fine with this. I don't know what Dennis or anybody else has to say. Anybody wants to come in? Nope. Okay, the next one is the number of representatives calculated using the average total number. Yeah, now this one, please explain.
Well, I think there was a bit of lack of clarity about how the number of representatives would be determined, which is relevant for determining then the levy imposed in certain categories for financial services providers. And so then this was more a question for clarification. And so it was explained, and this is also set out in the schedule for the Financial Sector Conduct Authority about how the average number of key individuals and representatives would be calculated. It would be based on the period from 1 September to the following 31 August of each year, and then dividing that number by 12. So then that is how it would be determined the number of key representatives that would be used, the average number that would be determined over a year. So that's, that was more a question for clarification than a particular issue. And then we come to—
Excuse me. Any question? Sorry. Can we stick to one at a time, right? Unless they're interrelated. Is it linked to the very next one?
No, we can take any questions on this
Yeah,
one.
you see, what we'll do is deal with one issue at a time. It just then makes it easier to go through it clause by clause. Dennis or anybody else? I take it the committee is fine. Okay, next one.
So the next set of submissions are from Straight, the Central Securities Depository, and their initial comment is that all central securities depositories and associated clearinghouse levies and of the Prudential Authority and the Financial Sector Conduct Authority should be viewed collectively and not in relation to each regulator, as they will have to be paid by a single supervised entity. And the response that is provided is that the levies are structured such that each type of supervised entity is charged a separate levy based on the different licensed activities that they are performing. And so the adoption of a Twin Peaks approach to regulation means that there are two separate regulators which have separate regulatory responsibilities in relation to the same supervised entities. And so then it is necessary and appropriate to be imposing levies for each of the regulators appropriately at an appropriate level in relation to the functions that they will be performing in relation to regulation and supervision.
Okay, any comments here from the colleagues? No. Okay. Yeah, you see, Janine, while I agree with you personally, this is exactly the set of issues that arose, you'll recall previously. And even it didn't arise, the issue is always, yeah, you see, Janine, ultimately, the cost will be borne by the consumer, by the customer, the client. Now, of course, you argue, and understandably too, that look, if they might pay these levies that are burdensome, they might pay the cost of the levies that are burdensome on lower income people, but the cost of the failure for them in particular is disproportionately damaging. Excuse me. So I understand it's a trade-off, but then you see, that's a generic trade-off. And what worries one though, is that within the framework of agreement about that, a lot can be done, which is not consistent with our concern that lower income people should not, bear the cost of the new system. It's a very elaborate system. From day one, as you'll recall, Janine, our committee then was worried about what the consequences. We've seen it before, Janine. Every time we introduce very good legislation, well, not every time, most times we introduce very good legislation and their cost to bear. Who bears the cost, right? Either the state or the lower income people disproportionately. But I don't know, what we do about it. I don't have an answer. Maybe the researchers and content advisors will help us before we vote on this bill, and maybe they want to think about that. That's one issue I'm raising with them. Okay, I don't have anything more to say. Anybody else? Nope. Okay, next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then the second comment is that Straight submits that the levy for the associating clearinghouses should be treated similarly to that of a trade repository, with a fixed maximum of 500,000 and 100,000 Rand for each of the FSCA and the PA respectively. The comments, the response provided is that the authorities do not agree to the proposal by Straight to have a fixed amount charged on an associated clearinghouse. The annual maximum for an associated clearinghouse has been reduced from 5 million Rand to 2 million Rand. So the regulators view that that maximum that has been set for an associated clearinghouse is appropriate for the nature of the regulation and supervision of that activity. I see Honorable Ryder has a hand up.
Thank you. I see you taking over chairing, but that's very helpful, Janine.
Oh, no,
okay.
sorry.
Nah, Janine, I don't mind, man. It's good. I hadn't seen his hand up. Okay, right. Good. No, Janine, I'm teasing you. Go for it, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, so, again, the fact that you were able to, following a complaint, reduce from 5 million to 2 million the levy placed in the automated clearinghouse is an indicator that these charges are pretty much a thumbsuck. It's not really based on costs, and I hear what you said about the fact that you chose not to drop it right down to 500,000 because of the costs associated with the regulation. But the fact that you went in at 5 million and then you were able to reduce it to 2 means that there hasn't really been a scientific or perhaps even a fair way of calculating. Normally a levy is based on costs, and this is what bothers me. And keeping costs to a minimum of the regulator. Well, what is a minimum? Because perhaps the head of the unit wants to drive a Ferrari instead of driving a Porsche, but that additional cost, that's the minimum. It's very loose and unscientific, and it just gives so much scope across to the regulator to kind of run things as they want. Chair, and I hear what Treasury is saying, and I think Mr. Davidson said that we're not going to avoid the cost of regulation. There will be a cost of regulation. I share the sentiments that you mentioned earlier about the fact that these costs are going to be passed directly onto the consumer, and that was the point that I made at the last time. I do see that this is reasonably unavoidable, but Chair, I think that it is incumbent on us as the NCOP, who invariably end up looking at the impacts of legislation. I think it's as much as I think that this legislation will pass, I believe that we need to review this in a year's time and see what the practical impact has been. We did speak last time, and I asked if modelling had been done of the cost per institution, and there was a comment that yes, the modelling has been done. So I think we will need to review after a year. How much has the cost of banking gone up as a result of these this regulation charge? So yeah, I'm just saying this is very unscientific there, and that last comment just confirms it for me. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, can I just say, National Treasury, that from a slightly different angle, but overlapping a lot with what Dennis says, I don't agree with everything he says, but the basic thrust of what he says is congruent with what I'm saying. First, I was a bit taken aback, right, that you dropped it from 5 million to 2 million. And the first thing that struck me is it's a big leap, right? It's a big change. So it makes one lose confidence. At least that's how it occurred to me before Dennis put it in a different way, which is overlapping substantially what I'm saying, I suppose. Like it makes me wonder, like, how can you drop something from 5 million to 2 million? And look at what Straight is offering. You know, like look at that figure, 500,000 and 100,000. Firstly, can you tell me a bit more about Straight, really? Why do they take these positions? It may make more sense to us if we knew exactly what their role is and maybe the rationale for them feeling the way they do. I mean, I know you spelled it out here, but it's important to know what their role is. But secondly, it is remarkable, colleagues from Treasury, that you dropped it from 5 million. It's like normally you'll drop it from 5 million to, knowing you, Treasury, the way you are. Not that I'm complaining, treasuries are like this all over the world, presumably, or most parts of the world. You'll drop it by maybe 5 to 4.5, and then you'll get pushed by the committees, and you may drop it to 4. But a leap from 5 million to 2 million is quite remarkable. Now, whether it is all unscientific and all, that's the area in which I may disagree with Dennis, but Dennis is entirely correct to ask that question. He raised it the last time. And you spoke about the modeling. I also like, Dennis is very much in tune with what we have been doing in Parliament since the Municipal Systems Bill. But the fact of the matter is, it never seems to work as properly as it should, because invariably when you go from one term to another, certainly in the majority party, there's a wholesale change in the members. So nobody follows up, though they get an exit report, that these are annual reviews we have to do. I really like what you're saying, Dennis. In fact, if you hadn't gone that far, I would have told you, well, give me an answer, give the committee an answer, and let's engage our NA colleagues, send it back, and so on if we have to. But you've offered a good answer, actually. I would probably have come round to it, Dennis, not now when I start working with the staff on a report, but you are making it very easy for us. I do think this has to happen. But remember, we have to persuade our NA colleagues. There's a 795 bill, section, but what I'm saying is, you know what? Although we can do what you're saying, Dennis, practically, because it's a 75 bill, right? Not that we can't do it. Yeah, we can, but it carries more weight if the NA does it too. So we do, as our secretary does, refer our reports to them. I engage with the chair regularly and the whip on that side. So I think this is a good way forward, because as you were edging towards finishing, I was wondering, what can we do? I'm agreeing with you, but now what are we going to do here? Because you see, what would be the point? You see, here it is where Parliament is weak overall. I'm not commenting on the current staff we have. If we had the staff that we need, we would then look at the modeling exercise and do further modeling of our own, based on our own scientific evidence, and draw on external experts, as we did on previous bills. In those days, let me tell you, colleagues, all we had to do is approach Speaker Frinijinwala and say, you know, those days we didn't have content advisors, and we didn't have like dedicated researchers per committee. I can tell you, we drew in Wits University on the municipal structures bill at the time, and the municipal systems bill. And they were excellent. They were former UDF activists mainly, who also were involved personally in local government. It was just wonderful. They advised the white paper, some of them, but we said to them, now you're serving us, forget the white papers, Treasury's, what was it, Department of Provincial and Local Government Affairs, that was called in the first 5-year term, I think. So you see, Dennis, you are right. You're doing a job as an MP. Now, I have tried since 1998, Dennis. That was thousands of years ago. And they to get more staff and, you know, the same matching staff as the departments have, and to pay the same salaries that the departments pay. And I've lost out, as have other old committee chairs. None of them is around. But what I will say to you is, in those days, we did get funding for external support. The last time we got it was with the Child Justice Act, I think. Yeah. But the Parliament stopped it because they said you have full-time staff now, you have dedicated research and a content, but to be fair to them. Let's look at tax, okay, Dennis and others. Can we match Treasury and SARS on tax? No. Antonia Manamela on that side is actually an expert on tax, but with the greatest of respect to her, she was in SARS, I think, or Treasury. She's very good, but she can't match the team of Treasury and the experience. They travel all over the world and they look at other, they attend these conferences. So again and again, we come back. How are we? You see, like the Zondo Commission is correct to say overall that we don't fulfill our oversight. Well, as far as political will is concerned, it's debatable, but it's credible. But you know, what's not fully appreciated is the staff that you need to match the uneven or the lack of balance between the executive and Parliament. In fact, Parliament should have more staff and maybe better paid staff if it has to be than the executive, because the power ultimately is with us, not with the executive. Anyway, I'm sorry to rave and rant, but my term is about to end if I survive for another 18 months, okay? So I'm leaving this with the next generation of MPs. We should never give up on this fight, really. It's just not right. You know, I'll tell you one final thing that really upsets me at the existential and political level. I read the bill, right? And man, it's so technical and so boring. I'm telling you, it's a very boring bill. It's not intellectually or politically stimulating. And I had to fall asleep yesterday and get up again and get distracted with the TV. This is not like the municipal systems bill. You know, it's like an exciting bill. You can even manage without technical stuff. This is a very technical bill. And how do we decide? How do we decide what's right and what's wrong, short of our own modeling? And how do we decide, you know, in 1-2 sittings that, oh, we've done our job? So there are bigger issues here. The next year, where's in Jadu and Mama Rafan and all? This is for you, mainly, and also people like Dennis. I'm sorry to go on, but hell, man, sorry, wrong word. What? I don't know what the word is. In Kulileko, somebody replaced the word hell with an appropriate term. You know what? This is not fair. Not fair on us, really. But it's over to the next generation. Right, let's move on. Sorry, as a chair, you have some license, but really I'm signaling to you, I'm not happy with how we're going to process this book, really. I don't feel comfortable with the role we are playing here. But there we are. Let's move on to the next one. Tell us first, oh no, let's settle this. What's straight now? Who's going to start? Janine, straight, what's straight firstly, and then deal with the issues that Dennis and I are raising.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Could I perhaps ask colleagues from the FSCA to please come in a bit and provide a bit more detail about straight, and then also subsequently the manner in which the particular levies for the associated clearinghouse and other categories that straight is referring to have been determined, and also explaining why there were some adjustments made to the levies, but in different drafts of the bill. Could perhaps Rita come in on who straight is, and then also maybe Paul and Belina on the formulation of the levies?
Good morning, good morning, honorable members. I think from FSCA, I'm not sure if Rieta is struggling to connect from her side, but in terms of we have followed that is the engagements in terms of the decrease in terms of the levies that we initially proposed. So maybe in a nutshell, to have members comfortable with the numbers that we are presenting. We did have detailed budgets in terms of getting to the numbers that will enable us to run efficiently and effectively as FSCA and the Prudential Authority. So that was informed by the organograms or the structures that we planned in terms of us operating. That is our operating model. So in terms of I hear honorable members in terms of saying that was it scientific, is it not scientific? The reliance, because it's a fairly new concept, it's a fairly new model of regulation. The reliance was on the basis that these are the activities that we're gonna be engaged in, and these are the resources that we're gonna be needing, like in terms of our IT infrastructure, which we costed to the last, and we then had the resources that we're gonna need in terms of the new model that we're gonna be applying in the industry. So the type of resources or the type of the skills that we're gonna be needing. So in terms of our overall cost base, because I think the key here is to say that we are not profit driven, it's purely on a cost recovery basis. And following that principle that is purely on a recovery basis, we have ensured that the structure that we come up as FSCA and the PA, it's efficient and then it's effective. In terms of the drop, in terms of the clearing houses, we have looked at the activities to say which activity is gonna be requiring more resources in terms of us regulating. So on that basis, between ourselves and the PAS FSCA, we have looked at those activities, and surely I can maybe say to the honorable members that it's definitely calculations, or like I said, a model that we have really applied our minds in terms of coming up with these numbers. At the end of the day, I think we have presented it before to say that from the FSCA side, I think we presented that we're gonna be running in the first year, we're gonna be running a deficit of 18 million. So all those variables that we have considered to say first year, yes, we're gonna have a deficit. Second year, we will almost break even. And then the third year, we will definitely be aligned. And then in the third year, that's when we will be certain in terms of the cost base. Everything would have been up and running, 100% operational. And I think like honorable members have been saying that maybe over the medium term, we will then be in a clear position to see exactly if what we have proposed to the members and to the FSP is definitely working. But I can once more assure the honorable members that we definitely have looked at these numbers, and it was purely on activity based and the type of resources that we're gonna be needing. I'm not too sure if Rieta from the FSCA would be in a position to add. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Is somebody coming in?
It seems Rita might be having a little bit of, oh, I see Rita's coming in now. Please go ahead, Rita.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and apologies for my background. I had to move, my internet is a bit unstable this morning. Yeah, maybe just, Chair, in response to your question on Straight itself and the functions it performed. So, you know, it is the only, well, it's one of two, but the only operator